Hey, you wonderful humans. My name is Dr. Paul Rimmer. This is the Hybrid Athlete channel, and this is one of our sports science shorts videos. Sorry, guys, I'm just playing with the camera there. It's a bit slidey this evening. Today, we're going to talk about something which is it's important, I think, for training program, but something that's often neglected or not really thought about. And I'm going to explain to you guys today why we should think about it and how we might apply it. So today, we're going to talk about heart rate reserve. So what is heart rate reserve? Heart rate reserve is our maximum heart rate that we would gather from a graded exercise test or during training to failure, minus our minimum heart rate. So why is this important? Why is this difference important? Well, the way to think about this is it's thinking about this as like the amount of gears that we've got to go through, okay? So if we're prescribing, say, training zones based entirely off heart rate max, which is a really common practice, that we then make an assumption that, okay, 50% of that is, say, 90 beats per minute of someone with a heart rate max of 180, and then we break down our increments and our training zones over the top of that. However, if someone's got a lower resting heart rate, or one athlete's got a lower resting heart rate than another athlete, the problem we have then is each training zone is going to be either extended or shortened dependent on their resting heart rate and how many gears they've got to go through. So that also means any prediction of thresholds, when we're trying to keep people in a certain threshold zone for a certain time, when we're trying to program, the number of intervals that we might have and how much time we want people to be at a certain threshold, or even if we're programming lower intensity, say zone 2 or zone 3 work, where we want people to make sure we're in those training zones, but right on the, maybe like if we're doing threshold work, we're kind of on the cusp. Obviously, that might be problematic if we don't take this into consideration. So when we are programming, I think, it's great to use heart rate max, but if we're going to just use heart rate data to program, which, has its own limitations, even using this method here, I think it's still really important to measure minimum heart rate and resting heart rate, not just consider that from the perspective of, oh, look, our athletes' adaptations are taking place and their heart rate is lowering. That is an important consideration, though, and the fact is that heart rate max is fairly untrainable past a certain point unless someone's very unfit, but we can reduce our resting heart rate through those training adaptations that we're not going to talk about today because that's a video within itself. However, we do need to consider this in terms of our programming, and also in terms of just things like if our athlete's getting older. I'm in my 40s now. The reality is that there is a natural and unavoidable decline for the most part in our heart rate maximum, but through different training, if I was to focus more on endurance work, I might be able to get my heart rate minimum down a little bit and increase that heart rate reserve. But even if that wasn't the case and I couldn't improve my fitness and reduce my heart rate reserve, it does also tell us though that, okay, we might be working a little bit harder at lower intensities than maybe a younger athlete with the same relative amount of fitness, but a higher age-related maximum heart rate. But it does tell me that I could probably work at lower durations and hang with younger athletes for a much longer period of time. So two things that might be borne out in a race strategy. We're not going to start getting involved in sprints and punchier stuff where our thresholds are going to be lower because our gears are smaller effectively. And it also means that we might want to shift our activities from, racing in a certain way or certain intensities or durations to longer duration stuff. And actually what's interesting is this is quite often borne out in the literature. If you look at things like marathon data, the amount of performance that people gain from, say, 18 to their mid to late 20s, and then how long it takes to drop off with age-related declines in performance, which isn't just due to this reduction in heart rate max. There's, reductions in tendon stiffness, in things like muscle output efficiency, power output efficiency, in muscle loss and things like that. You will actually see that reduction takes, someone into their 40s and 50s before they get back to the level they were when they were 18, 19 and young and sprightly with a much naturally higher resting heart rate, because one, they've built fitness over that time period, but two, it doesn't tend to have the knock-on effect once we've peaked, because it's not an event or a sport that we're really working in those higher zones where those gears have become increasingly more useful to go through. So those thresholds are a little bit more in our favor at lower intensities than if we go into that higher intensity work as well. Does mean we might be needing to work a little bit harder, but it does mean that we can hang with younger folks. So that's a little tip for you there. So apart from age and training experience, what else might influence our heart rate minimum? Let's say artificially elevate that, which then might cause problems. So one is stress and anxiety. So a lot of people will take their resting heart rate as a measure of health. Not just to see if training improvements have been made, but if someone's stressed, their resting heart rate might be slightly elevated or actually slightly decreased, depending on which component of the nervous system, the sympathetic or parasympathetic, has been activated. Different topic for a different time, but I will come back to that at some point, I promise. I'll talk a little bit about heart rate variability, what it is, what it isn't, and some of the measurements that we can take that we should keep an eye on, but maybe we shouldn't overly focus on. Sorry, I always segue on these videos. But so heat, humidity, ventilation, how much oxygen availability there is, fuel availability as well. You know, as our fuel levels or energy demand increases or our fuel levels decrease, our rate of perceived exertion is going to get higher, and that will cause things like cardiac drift, which is going to be the topic of my next video. And other things as well, hydration status, existing fatigue levels, stress and anxiety, and things like drug use as well can all have an impact. So if we're noticing that, you know, we're doing a training session and we feel like we've got less gears to go through, or we're fatiguing a lot quicker, or we can't hit those thresholds that we were previously, and there doesn't seem to be an influence of training status, or there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for it, that kind of information we can feed back and say, okay, well, actually, you know, what is different today? What were the conditions like? You know, how can we avoid that happening again in the future? That's always why it's quite useful to make sure that we do take resting heart rate every single day, because it might just give us some, not necessarily every single day, but fairly frequently, to give us some information in terms of our training status as well, and what maybe we should or shouldn't do the rest of that day. But it shouldn't be the only measure we take. I see people pinning their hat on heart rate variability and resting heart rate data when it's something that we should just look at, but just sort of ethereally in the distance, rather than something that we use as the key determining factor of whether we should train a specific session or train someone in a specific way. Right, you wonderful humans, I'm going to go now. If this video has been in any way useful to you, can you please give it a like and a subscribe? The more subscribers I get to the channel, the more opportunity I have to engage with you guys, and also ask get questions. And I'm going to open up a Q&A section as well once I get some more subscribers in. And just because it'd be great to see your support to make sure that like the videos I'm doing are worthwhile. So if you like these kind of videos, give them a like, give me a subscribe, and check out my other types of videos as well. And if you've got certain types that I like to do, just let me know and I'll do more of those. Anyway, guys, have a great rest of your day, wherever you are in this universe of ours, you beautiful human beings. Go and look after yourselves, go and train hard, and go and eat well. Peace.